The World Health Organization says the death toll since the start of fighting in Libya's Tripoli has risen to 264. This as African leaders gathered in Cairo to discuss the crisis in Libya. Eastern Libyan forces say they would intensify an assault on Tripoli, the capital in the west of the country that is held by the internationally recognized government. The Libyan National Army Force, loyal to Commander Khalifa Haftar, allied to a parallel government in the east, has launched an offensive but has been unable to breach the southern defenses of the city. The World Health Organization says the death toll since the start of fighting has reached 264, while 1,266 people have been wounded. More than 32,000 people have been displaced. Now, the latest flare-up in Libya, which has been mired in chaos since dictator Muammar Gaddafi was toppled in 2011, threatens to disrupt oil flows, foment migration across the Mediterranean Sea to Europe, and of course allow militants to exploit the power vacuum. I'm now joined in studio by Liesl Louw-Vaudran, the senior research consultant with the Institute for Security Studies. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thanks.
First of all, what's your reaction to the latest ultimatum that was given to the Sudan's TMC with regards to handing over power to a civilian government in 3 months?
Yes, I think it would have been expected. Initially, on the 15th of April, the Peace and Security Council of the African Union gave the Sudanese military council 15 days. But now negotiations have been going on with the protesters, and it seems that they would need more time. I presume that in Sudan, people would be disappointed. And also, if you look at the makeup of, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also participated in a coup, then Egypt was suspended from the African Union because of that. It's ironic that now he's chairing the African Union and is now the one to give an ultimatum to the new military rulers for handing over to a civilian government. So there was skepticism about this meeting. And as I say, some people might think now they're extending the deadline for 3 months. It might become 6 months, or, initially there was talk of 2-year transition. But the African Union has been very strict on illegitimate changes of government, coups. And I think in the statement today, the announcement was made that it recommends that the Peace and Security Council, which is 15 members of the elected members, should extend it by 3 months. And hopefully that it won't go beyond the 3 months, because the expectation is for the African Union to actually support democracy and a peaceful transition, and that this military transitional council will not just continue, and drag on. South Africa, of course, is chairing the AU next year. We play a very important role. I think it was important for President Cyril Ramaphosa to be at this meeting in Cairo today.
Now, since the chairmanship of Fattah al-Sisi has been thrust into serious question as a result of the reasons that you've just outlined, how likely would that affect, of course, the legitimacy of the incoming government after the TMC?
Yes, I think the legitimacy of the new government will depend on the negotiations then. And if the African Union can weigh in on making sure that there is a really representative civilian government, we've seen in many instances on the continent where coups have taken place, coup leaders have then taken off their uniforms and stood in an election, and then the African Union accepts them. And for some people, it is a disappointment, and we're still struggling in terms of the norms of the African Union. When is an overthrow of elected government a coup? When is it an assisted coup? I mean, we had the situation in Zimbabwe in November 2017. So it's a difficult position that it places the African Union. But I think coming back to the legitimacy of al-Sisi, it's true that there are many questions. Egypt also is a big power, has got a lot of interests in Sudan and Libya, of course, its big neighbors. But at least he has the mandate as chair of the African Union now to do this. They are playing by the rules for now. The Cyril Ramaphosa and Paul Kagame, last year's chair, was also at this meeting. Yeah. So hopefully, the African Union, and I think just lastly, I think what is good about this meeting is that the African Union is very often sidelined. When it comes to Libya, even Sudan, we have many outside powers like the Saudi Arabia. When it comes to Sudan, now the UAE, you have the European powers, the US. Everybody is involved except, you know, us and the African Union. So it is, I think it's positive that there was this high-level summit, many heads of state together to try and find a solution.
Already so much has been said about the suspension of Sudan's AU membership. So how likely would such a suspension affect the TMC's efforts to win international recognition?
Yes, you know, it depends on how sensitive they are to that. We've seen, for example, if you look at Madagascar in 2009, it was suspended from the African Union for a long time. There are other countries that have also, for certain periods, been suspended. Now, a military council can argue, well, we've got nothing to lose. What do we really gain from sitting in meetings of the African Union? But I think in the atmosphere it finds itself, with the protests going on daily still, you know, I mean, the people in Sudan are still in the streets wanting a transition to a democratic rule. Yeah. It will be difficult for them just to ignore that, to ignore the African Union, and also international aid, engagement by, for example, the European Union, the US, and a country that is suspended from the African Union, you know, will have difficulty navigating that for an extended period of time, I think.
Okay. There's then the issue of the International Criminal Court. I mean, should he be? I mean, should the former president Omar al-Bashir be dragged to the International Criminal Court? How likely will the African Union support him in that regard?
Yes, we know that the African Union, you know, is opposed actually to the International Criminal Court, and some, you know, strong members of the African Union. And my colleagues at the Institute for Security Studies have, you know, written at length about this and the implications of it. And at this stage, it seems unlikely that he will be handed over to the ICC by the Sudanese. They've said so even, because the ICC does suffer from, you know, a lot of controversy around the fact, you know, that mostly African, up to now, rebel leaders and so on have been targeted. That indictment against al-Bashir, that we had the drama here in 2015 at the AU summit, remember, when, you know, he had to, under cover of darkness, fly out
of the country.
And there was this court case against him. You know, it was very controversial, and there are many people within the African Union who felt that, you know, who protected Omar al-Bashir. I mean, he came to every single African Union summit that I've ever attended. I think, you know, Omar al-Bashir, he's always there in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, and elsewhere. He was always a staunch supporter of the African Union, I could say, and the African Union didn't sanction him because of that ICC arrest warrant. But I'm not an ICC specialist, and as I said, my colleagues who are legal experts have written on this issue.
Okay, let's now focus on the latest developments coming out of Libya. I mean, it does appear that the country is headed to an all drawn-out civil war, but then it doesn't look like the AU is doing much about this.
Yes, again, you know, actually in Libya, the AU has been sidelined ever since 2011, when former President Jacob Zuma was leading this high-level panel to try and negotiate with Muammar Gaddafi. And the AU, I think, legitimately complained a lot about that. The Europeans had meetings about Libya, and for the last couple of years, even to today, in January, I was at the summit in Addis Ababa, and the Shmal Shergi, who heads the Peace and Security Department of the AU, is the commissioner. He actually said, you know, that the AU and the UN should work together better on Libya. So now they had these big plans for a reconciliation conference. The AU was going to organize that in July. I don't think there's any reconciliation on the cards anymore, and it's devastating for us. As you said in the report, but also there are something like over 3,000 African migrants that are absolutely caught up in the firing
Sure.
line now. Many more of them in the country, and you know, for the African Union, who've been quite active in trying to get them out of Libya, it is devastating what is going on at the moment.
So what do you read into the global superpowers' interest on Libya? Is oil the main factor here?
I think initially, yes, definitely. You know, in 2011, the very, very quick way the UN resolution 1973, you know, that everybody had been complaining about, that South Africa had voted for. We won't go back to that controversy, but in the end, as I say, the quick military intervention by NATO in Libya at the time was linked to Muammar Gaddafi. People wanted him out as well. And of course, the oil is also a major factor. At the moment, well, there was this big threat that ISIS was going to get a foothold in Libya, and that gave some legitimacy to international, you know, involvement in Libya.
Yeah.
And it's also, you know, ever since 2011, we've had the massive migrant crisis. So Libya has become almost, you know, a porous border right on the Mediterranean, where migration, illegal migrants to Europe have flowed through. So Libya is strategically important. It is the oil, it is the threat of terrorism. I mean, for sub-Saharan Africa, for the Sahel, it's been devastating because of the spillover of the Libyan crisis to all of Mali, you know, the terror crisis and instability and war in Mali, Niger, even Chad. You know, the whole Sahel belt has suffered because of the instability in Libya.
So what can be done to stop this? Can somebody perhaps rein in General Haftar?
Yes, well, he does have strong backers. Even Donald Trump now lately has been on the phone with General Haftar and said he supported him. And allegedly Egypt, even France is accused of supporting General Haftar. He seemed to feel confident that he can just walk in and, you know, well, it's not been that easy. It's been about 2 weeks, I think, that offensive has gone on. But he certainly has backers. So we haven't had any news of what has been said in Cairo about Libya yet. We heard the statement on Sudan, but you know, South Africa as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council now for the next year now. I mean, we started our 2-year term at the beginning of this year. We have an important role to play as well. You know, we're faced with a difficult position because Russia and the US seem to be against calling for a ceasefire in, you know, reining in Haftar. So South Africa has to make difficult decisions, I think, as in the UN, because that is where the Libyan issue will probably be decided, not in Addis Ababa.
All right, Liesl, thank you so much for your opportunity. We really appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
All right, that was Liesl Louw-Vaudran, the Senior Research Consultant with the Institute for Security Studies. This is the Globe on SABC News. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.